Welcome, everybody. It's Thursday, May 29th. And I'm going to call to order tonight's meeting, the Planning Board and the Zoning Board of Appeals. So I'm convening the Planning Board, and over to you, Deborah, convene the Zoning Board. And I do so at 5:32 p.m.
And I will call the meeting of the zoning board to order.
Okay, same bat time, same bat channel. Okay, very good. So, the main topic of discussion for our joint meeting is the draft bylaw pertaining to standalone battery energy storage systems in town, BESS. In advance of tonight's meeting, I did circulate an email to, I believe, to all members of the planning board, and I sent it to the ZBA email list with the assumption that that got distributed to all members of the ZBA directly. That email I'll make part of the minutes. I'm not going to read it into the record because it's somewhat long. It basically provided some background that I thought would help us all be on the same page for tonight's meeting regarding the origins of this draft bylaw that came out of the work of the Energy Storage Systems CD Committee. Talked a little bit about the work committee, the states that what we see is the stakes of this, namely that at the moment, because Whately has no zoning bylaw in place that pertains to standalone battery energy storage systems, and because state law prohibits unreasonable regulation of such systems as solar facilities and battery storage systems, it's construed that at the fact that we don't explicitly allow systems in town, normally that would mean they would be prohibited, but given the state carve out for solar and battery storage, that carve out doesn't apply. So our understanding is that if a developer wanted to come in tomorrow to establish a BESS facility in town, we would effectively have no regulation in place. And so the motivation behind this was to get regulations in place as soon as we could reasonably do so. The main, I say, gauntlet we're running here is that whatever we produce, not only does it have to pass at a town meeting, special or annual, by a 2/3 majority, but it would also have to get approval by the Attorney General's office. And the Attorney General has been known to reject bylaws of this nature, citing them for unreasonably regulating such facilities. So if we were to, get this wrong and get a bylaw past town meeting and then have it rejected at the Attorney General's office, we'd kind of have to start over. So that's a little bit of counter pressure to, on the one hand, doing this as expeditiously as possible, but trying to do it correctly, right? And I laid out the fact that the Energy Storage Commission looked around. There's no state model for this kind of bylaw. Not, there are not that many battery storage bylaws in zoning codes around the state. There are a number of communities that have managed to put such regulations together and get them past the Attorney General's office. And the one that came to the Energy Storage Systems Study Commission attention as like the best of the ones that were out there was from the town of Medway. And so that bylaw, Medway's energy storage best bylaw, became a kind of model or template that one member of the Energy Storage Systems Committee primarily used to draft the Whately bylaw. So that's a little bit about the history, the stakes, And it's been, the bylaw got to a certain degree of maturation within the Energy Storage Systems Committee. And then they realized like it really needed to be turned over to the planning board for whatever we need to do to either get comfortable with it, fix it, but do we need to do with it? We've come to understand, obviously, it's not making this annual town meeting, which is coming up next week. There's some hope that we might get something in place for a special town meeting to be scheduled in, say, September, October, November of this year. There's some pros and cons of trying to pass something on such a complicated matter at a special town meeting. We usually don't, because special town meetings tend to be lightly attended, and Whately residents understandably don't like complicated things sort of seemingly shoved through under the cover of darkness.
They're usually just housekeeping issues for financial transactions.
That's right, that's right. So all I'm sharing with you is like, people on the storage committee is like, we need this, you know, we're vulnerable. And as long as we don't have one of these things in place, we remain vulnerable, and maybe that's an argument for getting something done to special town meeting, which would be the earliest it could possibly be done, versus waiting until annual town meeting of 2026, right? So again, I don't want to go into too much more about this background, which again will become part of the minutes. I would really like to limit tonight's discussion of this to no more than, I'd like to wrap this up at 6:30. All right, so about 45 to 50 minutes. We felt like this meeting, this joint meeting with the ZBA was really important. And I have some general and specific questions for the ZBA tonight. Okay. But the ZBA would be under this bylaw kind of the first line of defense, so to speak, that any BESS facility to be established under this bylaw would have to obtain a special permit. It would only be, these systems would only be permitted in certain zoning districts. So it feels like the ZBA would have to be very comfortable that if they looked at this zoning bylaw, that they would understand full well what they would need to do to evaluate an application. I mean, I think there are a lot of open questions, even at least in my mind, about how this process would play out. I don't understand the ZBA process as well as I understand the planning board process. So with that preamble, I wanted to kind of open this to ZBA members tonight. I sort of first like to say, do you have any general questions either about the background that I circulated in case there was things that are confusing about like how did we get here? Happy to answer those questions. Or do you have any general questions? I'd like to do sort of general questions and then specific questions or feedback about the current draft. So I really want to use this time to get feedback and interact with the ZBA about where we are, what we might do going forward. That sound good? So I'll just, like if I see either a Zoom raised hand or a actual video raised hand, I'll recognize, say, a member of the ZBA to pose any general questions.
I'm raising my hand.
Very good, Deborah, please.
Okay, well, I'm just speaking as a member now. And several of us did meet in May to go over the bylaw. But again, speaking as a member, I have never come across a bylaw that is as technically demanding and complicated as this one. I'm well aware of how vulnerable the town is. I know that these storage facilities are coming and that we need to be prepared for it. So I think from my perspective, I would need to know that the town would be available to provide a resource to help with the technological evaluation of this proposal. As it's currently constituted, and if somebody feels differently on the ZBA, please speak up. We don't have that expertise. That doesn't mean we can't acquire a consultant to help us at the charge, at the cost to the applicant, but that is my concern with this one.
Great. I want to listen for a while before I respond to anything, but thank you. Anyone else from the ZBA would like to? Robert?
Yeah, Deborah, I agree with you 100% after reading it over. I mean, I don't know how I could ever make a decision that was a responsible and well thought out one without the assistance of an expert.
Right.
And then, of course, that brings up the whole, who knows who the experts are and who gets to select the expert. That's something that we have to be very careful of, because I'm certain that a company could select an expert that would be an expert they've dealt with before. So I just have concerns about, there's no way that I could make a good decision on this. I agree with you 100% that it's so technical. So that's just my piece.
Fred?
Yeah, I don't know if this is getting too specific, but is this proposal or bylaw apply to just new proposals? And I understand that, well, I guess you have to have a solar facility to generate electricity for the batteries. Is it also apply to existing solar, or is it just new? And is the permitting process going to be one permit for both solar and battery, or is it going to be two separate processes, two separate hearings, two separate permits?
So that's a great question, and I think that's one I should respond to right away. So this draft bylaw that was crafted by the study committee, I'll just call them the study committee, right? This was intended to focus specifically on standalone battery storage systems. So that would mean a battery storage system, and these have been proposed. I mean, these are not unprecedented by any means. These would not have a photovoltaic system attached to them. They would literally, think of the analogy might be to the Northfield pump storage is an example of like a battery. I mean, that's really what it is. It's a standalone facility that stores power, stores excess power when there's excess power on the grid, and then releases it later when there's demand that needs to be satisfied. Now, we have currently in our Whately zoning code, we have a zoning bylaw that speaks specifically to large-scale solar facilities. And that for the most part deals exclusively with proposed new solar arrays, like we have on, say, Christian Lane. There is a little bit of language in the existing solar bylaw that pertains to battery storage that could be installed together with photovoltaic systems. The planning board have noted that this draft bylaw will require us as a planning board to make some changes elsewhere in our zoning. We'll probably have to make revisions to the solar generating facility bylaw to be consistent with the battery storage bylaw. We'll probably have to make revisions to our aquifer protection overlay district to ensure that that also articulates appropriate prohibitions. So what I guess I'm trying to say, Fred, sorry if I've been rambling, is that this bylaw as drafted was intended to only apply to any new standalone battery storage facilities proposed to be installed in town. And that's not, we will have not solved the problem of battery systems that are added on or part of solar arrays. We would still have to do that. But right now, we're just, you might think of it as like the crawl, walk, run strategy. We're trying to just get a bylaw in place to deal with standalone facilities, which seems to be the area of greatest concern. That these are the ones that people feel are potentially unusually large and come with risks to our natural resources and our aquifers. Did I fully answer your question, or did I just sort of scattershot around it?
Yeah, I guess you did. So the battery storage facility does not need to generate its own electricity?
No,
What you're saying.
Correct, Fred. It
Right.
can be just tied to the grid and controlled so that, say, maybe during the overnight hours when demand is low on the grid, the batteries are taking additional power and storing it so that they can release it during daytime of high demand. I mean, this is the kind of arbitrage, right? You buy power off the grid when it's relatively inexpensive during times of low demand, and then you sell it back to the grid during periods when it's more expensive.
So are there battery facilities in the area like being proposed here?
What I've been told, certainly nothing in Whately, let's be clear. We don't know at all.
South Deerfield has one, I believe.
We know that there's one in Amherst, right?
I was speaking with the South Deerfield Fire Chief and Fire Captain,
Okay,
Swayze and Kurt, or something.
okay,
And they said they've got, it's like a shipping container. And it went in and they didn't even realize it was going in.
okay,
They really don't have a problem with it.
okay. So we think anecdotally,
Yeah.
there might be a standalone
Do you know anything
battery,
about that?
small scale.
Do you know anything about that?
I don't know anything about that. I can get more information.
Oh,
Go ahead.
The fire chief here is part of our board, their board.
He's not a member, he's a distinguished guest and
All right.
here to provide expertise.
Well, I don't know how distinguished, but yes.
Okay.
Yes, so I don't know that story. I don't know, I don't know how much at risk Whately actually is. Because these facilities typically need to be. They have to be located in places where the grid connections are particularly good but we have, I guess we're well enough cited for the kinds of, next amp solar facilities that are around. So I've heard that Buckland there's been some proposal of a standalone battery storage facility in Buckland.
My understanding is there's one going in Amherst.
That there's one going in versus already there.
I think it's in the permitting process.
In North Amherst, as I thought, what I heard, like near the Cowell, in the North Amherst Cowell area. So,
Because there's a big next amp solar array there.
yeah,
Mitchell's property.
yeah.
There was one that this whole thing, that just got pushed back.
Well, yes, and they withdrew it was the last I heard. I
But
mean,
they didn't do it through planning. They
Yeah.
were going to be doing it through as a regular town.
okay,
And that's why it got pushed back.
okay.
But interesting.
So I don't know that there are that many facilities around, but I guess there's enough that people are getting anxious. And given the town's history with our water supplies and wells, I think we're trying to get ahead of that.
If I can just speak to one of the other points that was brought up a few minutes ago about third-party reviews, it's become very common, the last 10 years, particularly in large projects. There's a lot of companies that the fire service in particular utilize. They are, like, you think of it sort of as like an arbitrator, you know, you go to arbitration, it's a neutral party, they don't have. A vested interest with either party, they're just trying to seek out the best answers and the most, the best solution for everybody. And they have, obviously have experts that know way more about subject matter than, you know, we could ever do. And, if somebody wants to look something up, one of them is called Code Red Consultants. It's just a popular name that's out there that's been around the fire service for a long time. The people that I know that have worked with this type of companies for big projects have had very positive reviews. And it really helps to make a project move along a lot faster. And I think it would definitely help. That's something that if we had a system that came to town, that's something that I would want as a condition of permits, a third party review.
Right.
And I would utilize them. I would utilize the state resources that we have. And my job would just be to, you know, make sure that I'm happy with all the answers that we're getting and all the questions that are being asked. But
Yeah.
That would be my plan forward.
So maybe this is the right time to sort of speak to this top issue about technical expertise, because I will say that within the study committee, it was suggested, and I don't know if there's any precedent for this or how we would even go about it. So I'm kind of putting that out there. There is a provision in the draft bylaw that says that, you know, the town, the boards, presumably planning and or zoning or anyone could hire outside consultants to assist in the evaluation of these applications at the expense of the applicant. And the implication there is that we, however we would go, whoever the we is, and let's just imagine this was coming before planning and zoning, that we, the planning and zoning board, would get to choose a consultant or outside engineer to be compensated for, and their costs to be paid by the applicant. So it was suggested that that was possible. And language was written into the bylaw to say that would make that allowable. But to me, I think that raises all kinds of procedural questions. How do we get that expertise? If an application showed up tomorrow, how long would it take for us to go through a formal request for proposal? I mean, you can't just hire a buddy, you know, in a municipal town. Some of you think they're good, you have to do an open bidding process.
Depends on the amount.
Yeah, that's probably true. I don't know that this would be.
Under 50, it's not as big of a deal.
Yeah, so maybe, but that's an unanswered question.
I'm having trouble hearing whoever just spoke, Brent.
Also, I'm taking the minutes for the ZBA. I would like to know who is speaking each time they speak.
Actually, Roger, they're gonna take the minutes and then send them to us.
Yeah.
So you can relax on that one.
Okay.
No, we don't traditionally note who said what in our minutes, and we don't traditionally make our minutes as a kind of Mary McCarthy-esque transcript.
Nor do we anymore.
Do we want to go around and reintroduce ourselves?
I'm certainly
Because
happy.
they have names.
Yeah,
Yeah, and we
names,
can't see you. We can't see anyone but Brant.
and you
Okay.
can't drink the beer that we're handing out here. So I'm Brent Chaikis, Planning Board Chair.
JD Ross, Vice Chair.
Laura Ross, planning board member.
Sarah Cooper, planning board member.
And Patty Devine is Divine, not
Divine.
Divine, is not available to be here tonight. So those are, and we know all your names because you're doing the proper Zoom thing.
We have 3 stakeholders.
So, yes, and we have,
JP Kennedy, I'm the fire chief.
you're not, and the other guests are not required to identify yourself unless you want to speak, but I will offer you the option if you'd like to identify yourself.
Neil Abram, 184 Chestnut Plain Road.
Welcome, Neil.
Mike Maher, 11 Poplar Hill Road.
Thank you, Mike. Well, that was you. Okay. So yes, back to this issue of expertise. I don't know procedurally how it would work. I don't know, but since there were questions like Deborah, you asked, I think you're absolutely right. It seems like almost any version of this bylaw would require, seems to require that a zoning board and or a planning board evaluate various technical aspects of these systems, at least to confirm that they comply with X, Y, and Z. And we organically wouldn't be able to do that. So we would, I think, if one of these systems came before us, we would be compelled to have to go and hire outside expertise.
Right.
And we might have to plan to identify such expertise in advance and get them on some kind of retainer, because again, I don't know how this would play out.
The zoning board has had to look for expertise in the past. It wasn't quite this demanding, but I don't know that identifying competent consultants, I believe I heard the name Code Red Consultants, is that correct? So just having a database that that could be done at the town administrator or community development officer level, so that we just had a list of consultants. Now, if there's a going out to bid process, that is not something we've had to do in the past. I don't know if that would be, required of us, but to at least have that bank of consultants that we could turn to, that doesn't seem such an onerous thing to do, to have that in advance. I mean, I think we all understand that the bylaw needs to come. I mean, we need that kind of protection for something that is coming. So I'm just trying to think of ways that we can make this as easy as possible.
But it sounds like you're not so concerned about being able to access expertise. This may never happen in town, or it could happen, in 6 months. But it doesn't sound like you're too worried about our ability to get timely access to expertise to evaluate what we would have to evaluate.
Well, I'm only sort of surmising that, Brant, based on the fact that these systems are coming to surrounding towns, and I'm assuming that other towns are doing their due diligence as well. And from what I have read about these systems, they're coming. So the fact that they would be evaluated for their safety, especially the notion of the runaway fires, and I guess that's the main one I know most people are concerned about. I'm sure that that expertise is available to us. Or I would hope so.
So were there,
I just had a few comments, and I'm gonna end with a question to the fire chief about this. As I understand the bylaw is written, it's gotta be 100 feet above the floodplain, which excludes everything in the commercial, industrial, and commercial industrial zone, because we have no land available that meets that requirement that's above the 100 foot. So now we're talking about West Whately. It's gotta be 750 feet from a well or a septic system, which puts it in a point like 750 feet behind Laura's house or behind Mike Maher's house. There's no land available to put these on, according to the way this is written. And the Attorney General is gonna throw this out because it's overly restrictive. I'm also concerned that, as Deb pointed out to open this meeting, this is a very restrictive and technical bylaw facing us for technology that's changing by the day. And we go through this whole process and it's obsolete in 3 months and new technology is coming down the road. So I'm very concerned about that right there. But this is for a standalone array. This is a question posed to the fire chief. How does this differ from a large commercial customer in Whately? I'll pick on Yankee Candle right down the street, that they want to put in a couple of shipping containers full of batteries to offset their costs with panels on the roof, and they're going to store a bunch of power there to make them more efficient. is that risk any more or any less than a standalone array out in the middle of the woods behind Mike Myers' house?
Well, I'll be happy to throw some input on that. I think it's, from my point of view, and I'm by no means a subject matter expert, but the technology is going to be the same for storing the energy.
Okay.
And there might be some nuances, that are different with the way that the energy is stored, maybe the rates or the rates charged or discharged, I don't know. But certainly there would be the same types of hazards from a fire suppression standpoint. We'd be concerned about exposures, we'd be concerned about, water runoff, reusing water, we'd be concerned about a smoke plume if, something's burning. We'd be concerned about, an explosion risk or, site hazard for personnel. Concerned about life safety, and property conservation, in that order, but best of my knowledge, the technology is basically.
Okay. So if Yankee Candle or another organization wanted to put a huge battery packs in the building, they would have to get permits from the fire department already and comply with NFPA standards and rules and the state electrical code and the inspectors and the building inspector at a minimum for a project like that. Is that correct? Or
That's my understanding. This is the kind of question that I would certainly refer back to the state.
Okay.
To our subject matters at the state or code compliance office and our fire protection engineers there. And if a project was to move forward, then, like I said before, I would rely on a third party compliance company, and that's what they do. And the selling point for the third party compliance stuff is, my understanding, it's not a cost we would bear. Generally, it's something that the company would do. But the selling point is that not only are they gonna do it right and we'll have better agreement and the project will move along faster, but there's also potential that they can save money because, the project doesn't have roadblock after roadblock after roadblock. There's cost savings just to get the project done. And
So
my understanding is that a lot of times the speed of the project can dramatically offset the cost of upfront of having a code compliance.
So there's the NFPA and the fire service and the electrical code. It's gonna be much more fluid and reactive to new and emerging technologies
Certainly.
and the projects that come before you for permitting, they're gonna be subject to those regulations as they're changing with technology versus a bylaw that we pass that meets rules today and not technologies that change a year from now, where we're going through this process all over again.
Correct, and that's why my recommendation from the get-go with the language that the town's coming up with was just to refer back to documents that are already in place and let them update the documents so that, every time they update a document, like an NFPA doc, updates 855, that
Right.
you don't have to rewrite, something and put it before the town.
And in
I
general,
think.
we have been respecting that idea, like building in references to
Yeah.
other resources and slow kind of.
We're not trying to restrict these coming into town. What we're trying to do is have them come in a safe manner that protects public safety, protects the environment, protects our aquifer.
That's right.
And from what I know from the fire chief, the process that they're going through, they already do that. In their permitting process, the applicant already has to do that. So we're adding another layer on top of stuff that's already being done.
Well,
Yes
yeah,
and no?
right, that is true. That
Okay.
right now, in the scenario you described, in the absence of any kind of zoning bylaw. If Yankee Candle, which has a facility in the industrial district, right?
Yeah.
Their facility is in our industrial district. They could add that kind of facility. There's nothing in zoning that would stop that, and they would have to follow whatever existing rules and regulations.
If this bylaw passes, they could not because it doesn't meet the floodplain, it doesn't meet the separation.
That's correct. As the current, as currently drafted, and again, I wanna reiterate that this draft is not final, and I don't think that that language about the floodplain is correct, just to be clear. I think that was an error in the drafting.
Okay,
But if indeed we strangely passed a bylaw that said nothing that's under, it has to be more than 100 feet above the floodplain, whatever that means, then indeed Yankee Candle would no longer per zoning be allowed to do that.
so we're discouraging people from putting batteries, companies putting batteries.
The whole purpose of zoning is to regulate land use, what can and can't be done where. So what can be situated in a residential zone,
Okay.
like most people who live in AR1 maybe don't want a battery storage standalone, like they don't want their neighbor to sell out, have the house raised and a standalone battery facility built there instead. So those are the kind of things that we accomplished through
Okay.
zoning. And yeah, so Neil.
If I may, Neil Abram, 184 Chestnut Lake Road. The passage in the bylaw, draft bylaw, as I understand it, on page 3, item 6, makes reference to the fire safety compliance plan complying with regulations in paragraph. It doesn't say what paragraph has to be complied with. So that might help with the issue being addressed, though I will say the situation described of Yankee Candle doing something, if they have an approved solar generating facility, then that battery storage facility would be grouped with solar systems
At
and
present,
not
that's
as
correct.
standalone.
That's
So it depends on who's doing what
Yeah,
standalone that is covered here, but affiliated with a solar system, it follows the solar system.
you were correct.
regulations.
And we acknowledge,
So are we discriminating?
no, hold up, back up.
No, I'm just saying,
We're saying
what
right
this
now.
applies to.
Yeah,
Okay.
and if we passed a bylaw that addressed standalone battery storage, but did not, as this current draft does not, address battery storage together with solar generating facilities, then the only bylaw that deals with the combination is our existing, what I describe as inadequate bylaw that deals with large-scale solar generating facilities.
So to that point,
Yes.
my last comment is that when that current bylaw was approved, or discussed and then approved, the technologies were rapidly changing. The fire, safety, and explosion risks were quite different depending on the battery technology, and there are further changes in the battery technology. I wonder if this bylaw and the existing bylaw as well are specific enough that when the system is approved, it is a specific battery technology that is approved? Or is it in principle that you approve a battery energy storage permit? And if the proprietor wants to swap out one type of battery for another type of battery, do they have to go back through the permitting process? Or do they have a permit now to have a battery storage, and this does say a building, though these are not
Right,
tractor trailer
shipping containers.
shipping containers or whatever, but
I think
is it approved?
the code might consider that a building if it's permanent, so yes.
Right, but is it approved irrespective of battery technology?
So let me,
Or is it approved a particular battery technology, and how far back in the permitting process do you have to go if you want to change the battery technology?
okay. So let me speak to the one general point, which is that indeed there are different battery technologies, battery chemistries, whether it's lithium ion or nickel metal hydride or whatever. And in fact, in the original Town of Medway draft, language that was dropped in drafting the Whately version. The Medway version, right at the very beginning in the applicability section, called out, they set different lower bounds based on they identified 5, let's call it 6 different chemistries. They spoke to lead acid, nickel, lithium ion, sodium nickel chloride, flow. So they were somewhat aware of the fact that there are different chemistries. However, the bylaw didn't attempt to create different regulations or different, say, dimensional requirements or anything else based on battery chemistry. Rather, there were references to these existing National Fire Protection Association or NFPA codes that do vary based on battery chemistry, right? So we didn't want to build in specific language in our bylaw about specific battery chemistries, but we did want to reference outside standards that set different requirements for different battery chemistries. But that's only part, there's only part of the point that you brought up. Then you brought up that what if a developer comes in with lithium ion, and that's, they say, this is what we're going to deploy. And indeed, they commission a storage facility with lithium ion on day 1. And a year or 2 down the road, they're like, hey, we've got this different battery chemistry, right? And now we want to pull out all the old things, and put in this new chemistry, right? And you're asking, what would happen then? And now you're going to stress my memory of, I've been looking at so many different battery storage bylaws. I've seen, and maybe in our draft, forgive me, I don't have it memorized. There has been language to the effect that whenever changes, that there must be notification at least when changes in chemistry or, any changes in the operating facilities are to be made. But I'd have to look more carefully at whether that would invalidate a permit or require a new special permit. I don't know, does anyone on the ZBA have any relevant experience in other situations like this?
Well, in our special permitting process, in general, a special permit will follow a use, but the ZBA has discretion to be able to say something like, this permit is only issued to this applicant and is non-transferable. Similar language could be used to say, this permit is for this. I don't even, Neil, you probably have the language that I don't have. This permit is for this configuration, this iteration of the storage facility, and changes to that require coming back before the board for review. I mean, I could see the changes, the review being necessary strictly for safety concerns if the technology changes that much. But again, this is not my wheelhouse. I don't know how fast this technology is changing. I don't know what the safety implications are for different technologies. And this is why having this database of consultants that we could turn to would be so crucial.
Well, I'll take your input as a recommendation. I'm going to put these words in your mouth and tell me if these are the right words. That you are recommending that we consider putting into our bylaw appropriate language to the effect that were significant changes to be made to an operating facility. Either a permit would expire and need to be re-permitted or something to that effect. Because I believe I've seen language to that effect in other bylaws.
Yes, I think specifically that's relevant to changes in the chemistry, because the extinction risk, the firefighting challenges are quite different for these different ones.
Okay.
And it extends to clearly, shall I say, non-specific language about fire fighting, fire suppression, about problem with runoff.
Yeah.
As if there are toxic materials of any sort or toxic materials that are created by the addition of water to things, for example, water on lithium, evokes fire rather than suppresses fires. You have to think about it. Now, cooling is great, but you don't want to cause chemistry. But if that takes a lot of water for cooling, it's likely to overflow whatever the containment area is. And so that water laced with whatever contamination there will be floods into the system. And you could be 100 feet above floodplain, but if you're dumping thousands of gallons of water in short order, you could spread whatever that contamination is, if there is contamination, spread it right down to the floodplain. So we need to think about not only the containment in the neighborhood of the facility, but in the event of a fire requiring massive intervention, you do require there to be adequate water, but you don't really specify where the water is going to go and what it might contain, which will depend on the battery technology, battery chemistry, and how it reacts to water. So I think thinking through more specificity about the containment of water from firefighting and cooling should be in the plan that is required. And I think there's added risk to the aquifers and so forth by how much water might be required and where that water has to go.
Very good, thank you. Chief Kennedy, did you have a comment?
There was just two things I would like to speak on quickly about that. One of them was there is reference to licensing
Yes.
in here, and generally, I know there's lots of different types of licenses out there, but I think this would probably fall somewhere in the realm of like a land license, something that we would see for storage of explosives or storage of large quantities of propane or fuel storage. The license shouldn't be confused with the permit because they're two totally different things. The license will stay with the property, with my experience with this type of application, and the permit would be for a permit to exercise
the use
of that license along with the registration. And I think a change of use would trigger a permit request, and then that would trigger from how I would handle it on my end would be I would want to another plan review, and I would want to see what's being changed, and if it's a minor change, then it's no big deal. If it's something that's totally changing how the system works, then I would want a third-party review to bring that back in again. I think we need to just keep falling back on third-party reviews because the technology isn't here. We can't talk about a technology that might happen further down the road. And the suppression aspects, it's still the jury's out a little bit on how to handle some of these large scale things, and that's something I would rely on third-party review for. Some industry experts to come up with a plan for our particular department and how we would address a situation like that. But there's always, we're always looking at risk benefit, and certainly there would be water used in a battery energy storage system to try and contain an incident in its incipient phase, so its beginning phase. So you want to try and cool the batteries that aren't affected. They're racks of batteries. It's not one giant battery. You want to try and cool the adjacent stuff so that hopefully you can contain whatever the problem is to one cell, one group of batteries in there. And if you can do that, then you have a much smaller problem. If we're there and this turns into a giant thing where the whole container is burning, it's quite likely that, risk benefit, we might be better off letting something burn and having atmospheric release as opposed to trying to put something out, which probably isn't gonna go out. You're just gonna prolong the amount of time that it's burning, and you'll have runoff, and you'll have to contain runoff, and so you'll have lots of issues, and there's other factors that play into that, which way the wind is blowing and what kind of populations you have around and stuff. Do you have to close a highway? Do you have to stop high-speed rail or something? But that's, what if things down the road that you have to have a plan for that we would rely on, a third-party consulting to try and help us come up with a plan for that individual site. So I hope that clarifies a little bit from
Thank you.
my perspective.
Sarah,
3 things, but fresh one in my head. Yes, very much, I think. Hopefully, and I suspect what ZBA does is very much looks at this proposed site, because very much the firefighting, fire suppression issues will be where that site is located. If it is right down on the riverbank, it's much different issues than in the woods up on Esterhound or whatever. Second thing is, in our current bylaw about the solar, it's all about kilowatt. It doesn't list nickel, lithium, or any of the type of batteries. So I mean, keeping the size generated, maybe that is the basis we want to keep it on. And the word significant, if we use that for significant change, is definitely differently interpreted.
yeah, and we'd have,
So I don't, more specific level of what we change.
I think I've seen examples of the right kind of language, right? Yeah, so I was just speaking loosely and informally. Is there specific comments or feedback? I mean, I really valued this time together with the ZBA. Is there specific comments or feedback from ZBA members other than what we've heard so far? See, Roger, you leaning in, but.
Well, you asked about ZBA process and insight into ZBA process. So to address that briefly. And our board has been together for many actual decades. So speaking from a consistent group, we generally view the separation of powers between our boards as a good thing, and we take what the planning board and of course the town approves as the bylaws, and then we run with them. So it's a fresh opportunity for us to have some insight and input at this stage, because we've rarely, if ever, done that. But is it a bad thing? No, it's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. But I also draw a certain comfort in at least to myself, saying, I don't have to worry about how they came up with it, but I just have to try to interpret it when a matter comes before us. So it's kind of like the legislature, you're the legislature, and we're the judicial branch, and then so we interpret what you have done in your wisdom. I don't know if that gives you any insight, but that's my mindset, or that has been my mindset over the years.
It is helpful, and when I've been looking at different towns' attempts at this, it seems to me that I've seen a much clearer delineation in the bylaws between the portions of the bylaws that seem to be directed to the special permit granting authority, and sort of separating out those concerns from the concerns of a planning board doing site plan review. And when those get muddled together, it seems to be the situation in a town where the site review organization is also the special permit granting authority. But in our town, we've separated those two, as Roger said. And I think I've seen, in fact, even in Medway, in the original Medway version, they had sections specifically addressing permitting requirements. which I think I read as, this is what a special permit granting authority would be paying attention to. Though in Medway's permitting requirements section, I also saw some things that seemed to be in the purview of a planning board doing site review, like looking at signage or landscapes. My point being that I think there is still work to be done, because I don't like this idea for something this complicated, to just us craft something and then let the ZBA run with it. I think we can do a much better job than this current draft does of separating and speaking appropriately to what the two different boards' concerns are. Were
Let me
there,
throw in one other funny thing. So in a lot of towns, you're right, the planning board also has special permit granting authority. And so as a lawyer, every once in a while, I'll read a case where the planning board has sued the ZBA or vice versa in a town. And so, I sort of look, I get alert when I see that. So, oh, this will be a juicy one to read about it. And so, fortunately, we've never had that here in Whately.
Knock some wood.
Yeah.
so seeing to the hour, were there others who haven't?
Fred has something.
Yeah, I have a question. I think in the proposal, it talks about distances to property, adjacent properties. I think 100 feet for boundaries from adjacent properties, which I think is easy to identify. But there's also language in there of the 750 feet from private wells or septic systems. How are we going to determine that? There's no such database exists in the town for that. Are you going to rely on somebody to, I mean, how would ZBA verify that when it doesn't exist anywhere? I think you need to be specific as to what that dimension is or requirement is for proximity to septic systems and other town water. Or else maybe the Attorney General's office is going to say this is too specific, and you're excluding every kind of battery facility in town. So it's not allowable. I think it's pretty hard to determine them distances the way it's written.
So let's note that in the minutes, because I do want to wrap this up, and we might convene another joint meeting at another appropriate time. I want to just conclude with a couple of things. As tonight's meeting was approaching, and indeed over the last month, I've been doing much more digging into this matter than I was ever able to while I was on the study committee. So that just came at a bad time in my particular life. And I feel like there's more work to be done to try to come up with a satisfactory bylaw. I asked Pete, and he's gonna now take this to town council. I did note that town of Medway, back in 2021, before they had their BES bylaw together, they passed a moratorium. They basically temporarily banned the establishment of such facilities. And that passed, and that was approved because it wasn't an unbounded thing. And they were indeed at work, and they hired a consultant, and they got a zoning bylaw in place. So acknowledging the fact that people are concerned about our vulnerability in the absence of any regulation, I've asked Pete to ask town council whether we, at say a special town meeting in the fall, could pass, say, a 12 or 16-month strictly time-bounded moratorium. Okay? Such systems may not be built in Whately, until and unless, such a date passes. And we can provide copious evidence that we're working on this, we're serious about getting a bylaw in place. So I don't know if that'll fly or not, right? Because there's precedent for it, right? But it always depends on what the current Attorney General's office is going to allow. So this is, I just want to put this out there. I really don't want to feel rushed. People like Neil have asked some great questions. These issues of expertise, I feel like I think there was some hope that what came over from the study committee would be basically ready to be taken to a public hearing, but I don't personally feel that it's close. But I understand the concern that the longer we wait, the longer we remain vulnerable. So let me see if we can get a moratorium that if that seems like a way to go, then we can not so much take our time, but be appropriately deliberative in getting a bylaw that draws on the best practices from other towns and satisfies all the concerns that have come up tonight. So I don't have anything that I just had that idea the other day, so I don't have any outcome for you tonight, but we're gonna pursue that.
Can I just close with a couple comments?
Please.
Okay, because we're going in circles here, but see, the issue is a standalone system right here, and I said, are we discriminating against a standalone system versus handler whoever wants to add a system to the side of an already existing use?
Right now, they could do that following the current solar bylaw.
They could add a battery storage right there. So are we discriminating and saying, you can't have a standalone system over here, but we'll let you can have the same size batteries over here, you can't?
It's an interesting question, and it would have to be figured out however we pass this moratorium. Because
I'm not saying we're trying to become the battery system, we're saying only standalone, but if it's already part of other projects,
personally,
it's not a standalone.
Personally, my feeling, JD, is that to do this right, see, different towns have broken these solar things up in different ways, and so this is a bit of a hodgepodge. I think to do this right, shouldn't have bylaw on just standalone battery storage.
Everything.
We should have one bylaw that pertains to battery storage, whether it's part of a solar array or standalone.
I agree.
That's the right way to do it.
Yep.
Judy drafted this to try to be like surgical. Let's do one for standalone and then fix the solar bylaw down the road. And if we have enough time to do it right, that's the way I would go.
Okay.
And then it would be, we'd fix the floodplain issues.
Moratorium would allow that.
All right, so let's see if that can be the course of action. I would ask before, say, the ZBA gavels out and we just get on the planning board business. What I would ask of the ZBA members, if you are willing and able to do that, is to look over the town of Medway's best zoning bylaw. And I'll forward a stripped down copy of that if I haven't already forwarded it in PDF. But it would be helpful if you were to just give me feedback along the lines of what provisions in that bylaw you feel like should be in the permitting requirements. We'll tell you what, in fact, let me not even try to articulate this tonight. I will send you guys an email request that is going to be better than me rambling right here and now, just asking for some additional review and input to us outside of a live meeting. So you can deliberate that on your own, put that together, send it as a document from the ZBA to the planning board, and that will be very welcome and appreciated. Is that okay?
That would be great, Brent. And why don't you put a date on it? The date you need that by.
I
Yes.
will.
Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely. Okay, so it's over to you, Deborah, to wrap up tonight's meeting of the zoning board of appeals.
Okay, thank you. Do I have a motion from a member of the ZBA to adjourn our hearing?
Well, hold
So
on.
moved.
Wait a
Yes,
second, wait, hold on, because,
Deb,
go ahead, JD.
according to the agenda, you had items not anticipated.
Yeah. Do you have any items not anticipated?
I don't have any items not anticipated.
It's on your
I have no
agenda.
unanticipated items. Okay.
We try to hit all our agenda items. Okay.
So we have, Roger has made a motion, a second.
Second.
Thank you, Bob. Okay, the zoning board thanks you for your time and we
Okay.
are adjourned.
As
We'll
does the
look for your
planning board.
email.
All right, thank you all.
Thank
Have
you.
a good night. You're welcome to
Thank
stay.
you.
for planning
Thank
board
you,
party.
planning board.
Nice to see
Thank you,
you, Neil.
Neil. Thank you, Neil, for your input.
Thank you.
Okay.
Do we want to get Alan out of here before we take over this stuff?
Yes, well now. Yeah, Alan's up next.
So what we're gonna do is small manufactured home stuff it goes.
No,
Yeah.
He gives me an R.
for the A and R.
Yeah.
We'll move that up.
Get him out of here.
Yeah, the A and R is, oh, here's my copy of
Full
the.
disclosure, I have a brand new Fairview Farm shirt. I'm the owner. I paid for it,
You're, oh, the planning board?
but I paid for it.
Okay.
So, Alan, could you sit here to my right, please?
I can.
Because you have not given this, I haven't been able to look at any of this material in advance.
Okay.
So, can you
I'll
confirm?
pass these out.
All right, so what I need I need the 4 copies, you sent me the digital copy of the plan. So I have the 4 copies of the application, I saw the application in photo, so it looked right, and again, I will note that you are affirming that the affected parcel is not under agricultural preservation restriction.
Yeah.
Okay. That's no go if it's not the case. So we don't have any planning board members on Zoom, so why don't you unroll your plan and we will gather around your plan. Oh,
Do we have the stamp in house?
well, do you have the check?
I do.
All right, I have to take the check. Good job. Very good. So there is an actual check in the amount of $50 made out of the town of Whately. I gratefully accept payment for this A&R, which I will turn over to the town clerk. All right, so please, explain to at least me what's going on here.
Our neighbor is looking for a little bit more of a backyard,
Okay,
asked us if we solve all of our land.
okay,
We have agreed to do so.
okay.
It's 0.416 acres,
So your current lot is,
50 acres.
okay. So this is somebody else, this is somebody else.
This is who I'm
No,
selling.
that's who.
Oh, this is well, it doesn't matter, but that's
Right.
not your property,
No.
so your property is demarcated all through here. So you're just gonna convey, you're just gonna A&R this piece
Yes.
for the purposes of conveyance. Everything I've ever seen about our A&Rs say this is a perfectly
He
legitimate,
already has, yeah, there's already frontage, there's already, yeah.
and it doesn't have to be a buildable.
Nope.
Yeah, the use doesn't matter to us.
Yeah, the use does not matter to us, whether it's complies with zoning doesn't matter to us at all. So I see no reason why we can't approve this A&R. Do I hear,
I make a motion,
has everyone like looked at this plan?
Yeah.
Everyone's like, okay, all right.
make a motion, we approve the A and R requested by Sanderson Brothers Realty LLC.
Okay, motion has been made, and motion made by JD and seconded by Sarah. So we'll do a vote here, it's all in, you just raise your
Yep.
hand. Unanimous. Okay, so now what we need to do is, we're gonna, let me go grab the Sharpies and the stamp.
Yes, my way.
He does it in my large
Yeah.
right there, so yeah.
Oh, yeah.
we have to own your Sharpie.
So just give me, this is the one bit of prep for tonight's meeting. I failed to do, I have to let myself have this office. So everybody just, talk amongst yourselves for a moment.
You ready? You should.
No, but somebody has to do it.
Thank you. Very much. Look, you can CP.
Yeah.
Liaison, step right in there.
Yeah. This is a far cry from the co-op board where we eat dinner and then,
We're not allowed to do that. And you can't take any gifts over,
No,
I think it's 50. Yeah, you're. It was great. It used to be on Tuesday nights, so the auction was going on.
Oh, yeah.
I really liked it on Tuesday nights.
So it's normally Wednesday.
It's Wednesday at 5.
Did we decide to change all of them to 5:30 though? You were,
Doesn't really
you're on your
matter
way out.
to me.
I would like to change them to 5:30,
Yes,
because I
yes.
usually don't even get out of work till
Right.
5, and that's like hustling to get here.
Yeah, I came from work.
Yeah,
It's a harder. It is.
Yeah, 5 o'clock's fine.
Wednesday I
in
work from home,
January.
so that's a lot easier. That's nice.
Yeah.
Coffee.
Great, look, it's awesome shirt. I like to wear a Whately,
Okay.
Whately shirt, whatever, t-shirt. I like it when Dave hates the weather in that shirt.
Yeah.
What is it, tobacco leaf?
Yeah, yeah.
Nice.
The only shirt you ever find, exactly.
If John wore t-shirts, I'd get him one.
I have like 3 minutes left over today in time, I just have to have a swim in the fire again today. Today, 3 hours ago. Gave her $20, out the door. She's only 15, I'm like, donate to charity.
Yeah, I just don't like to do it.
You're gonna like it, Mike. Good quick. Yeah.
Yeah.
We did a whole moving around in the filing cabinets with our special stamp. Magic stamp. Sharpies. Keep it up. All right, got it, we know the drill.
We stamp it before we send it.
Yeah. Yeah. Magic stamp, yes, let's do that stamp.
We decided we had the library.
Yeah, decide this, this.
That.
Sure.
Okay.
Okay, so all we need, so tell you what, why don't, I'll do this and then you can maybe move one over there and I'll do. For that table, so that can be the issue signing.
Here, I'm gonna steal a shark from the side.
Yeah.
But she has to put corner behind us, it's like, yellower, it's yellower.
I brought
Wouldn't put them behind the back. Oh. What's the corner back there?
You're gonna sign it upside down?
Yeah.
You can't read mine anyway. This is just. Mine.
Yeah. A lot easier than my old ones.
We're lining all
Yeah.
these.
Yeah.
The number of copies that have to be.
Yes.
5-4.
Four in my mind.
Sometimes extra brush, you just sign it.
So, so he gets the Mylar and one copy, one paper copy. And we keep the other three, one is for the town clerk, one is for the planning board, and one is for the assessor. All right, oh, and I gotta do this.
Yeah.
Always fascinating watching John's finger hold these correctly.
Sisters getting married, right, you're just getting married.
Okay, we keep three.
Three copies.
Okay. Those two are yours, Alan.
Okay, and then here is one signed copy for you of your application.
One we did yesterday.
The other thing, another way.
Ryan just is on.
Yep, it was a close game. He has a big pizza party and all the kids played together, so I don't think they wait.
I don't think anyone cares.
They don't, no.
No.
The stakes are pretty low in second grade.
They just need to shut them
I'm gonna
out.
do- You are all set. You are all set. Thank you for dealing with the. All right,
Thank you, guys.
all right, have a good night.
Good one.
All right. All right, so, so we're gonna save
No,
those.
he only, how does it, this is the corner that needs to show? When they're folded.
Oh, yeah,
Is that it?
there's something about the folding that I was shown at one point that I,
Dawn, I'm sure.
yes. So I'm just gonna roll it up and I'm gonna officially deliver it to the town clerk.
Good luck, who did it.
Yes, well, first with the check and copies of the signed applications. And I'll get my Sharpie. All right. All right. Let's move on, yeah, let's move on with our agenda here. Yeah, thank you, Sarah. All right. So we continue in session, we've done our A and R, why don't we do approval of minutes? I did circulate minutes of April 30th.
I'm good with it.
I received no comments or corrections. So, yeah.
All second?
All right,
Put that up,
so
thank you.
who made, was that you, Laura, who moved to, JB? moved to-
I make a motion, we approve the minutes of the planning board of April 30th.
All right, getting really good at that, as befitting a vice chair. And so it was what Sarah who seconded it, all right, all in favor? I unanimously approve the minutes, yay for us, okay. We're not really going to discuss any. I think Bess has been taking our attention, so we're not doing anything about other bylaw amendments about mobile and manufactured homes this round. I have some various sort of updates. First of all, is anything else going on at exit 35? That's so sad.
You mentioned that we're not gonna meet in June.
So I'm gonna get,
Okay.
okay, so remind everyone that annual town meeting is on next Tuesday. So you're welcome and encouraged to attend. I'll do the motions on the two zoning related articles. I've got some talking points together. So that should be fine. I've asked on the floodplain, I've asked, Pete to make sure there are copies available of the zoning map that shows the FEMA flood zones. Because, my point is gonna be, if you you know, if you have property in these areas, and they're not lots, it's not lots of land, but if you have property in this area, then, and you wanna do something in those areas, which we hope you don't do, then this definitely applies to you, but it affects all of us because stuff that happens in the flood zones, when they flood, you know, that stuff finds its way elsewhere, so.
Are we, as DMTC gonna have?
DMC
Are they gonna speak?
So I have kept them in the loop. I've told them, hey. Annual town meeting is this, your warrant article's up. You, because you're a non-resident, you need to just coordinate with the town moderator to be recognized. I said, I would encourage you to attend. I'd encourage you to have a handout or something. I'd encourage you to, you know, I will make the initial motion and I will summarize.
Is that a rule, can a non-resident speak at town meeting?
But they need to be recognized by the town moderator.
Okay, so they can't vote, they obviously can't
They
vote,
can
they can
vote.
speak if they're recognized.
Yeah, they can be, that's right.
Okay,
Totally fine.
Okay.
We should,
I don't know, I'm asking a question.
yeah, no, I mean, I think it's totally reasonable, like that I'm not gonna. I'm certainly not gonna speak, I'm not gonna speak in that kind of advocacy, I'm gonna just basically follow the points in our report, like. You know, we felt like this is, you know, not necessarily good for Whately, not necessarily bad for Whately. Probably not gonna do much harm, probably not gonna, there's probably not gonna be many of them if even more than this one. But ultimately, none of us live in the particularly affected zoning districts. Even though I might call you out as like you're a member who has property in,
As
in
a
the
private
current
residence, I could say, look at, I could do this in my property in each road.
yeah, right. Okay.
People need to know that it's not just the sugar shops that this applies to, it applies to all commercial properties.
Yes, that's right, but that, I'll basically say, this is like. Rockwellian democracy at work here, like you guys get to decide how comfortable or uncomfortable you are with this. That's that, so hopefully then somebody from DMCTC will get a chance to. At least advocate for it. And then, you know, there'll be whatever discussion there is.
I mean, you're taking the point, and I haven't been anywhere on it, but you're gonna emphasize that we have to do something about the floodplain.
Oh, yes, oh, yes.
Okay.
It's state law.
This
Oh,
has
yes.
to be.
Yeah, I'm going to basically say it's sort of must pass. Must pass,
I mean, if,
and it's sort of a no-brainer because, I mean, it's been through so much review, you know, it's.
okay,
But I'm gonna be upfront that the intent of the floodplain bylaw is to discourage development in the flood zones. And this new bylaw will mean increased scrutiny of any kind of development taking place in those zones. And we should, you know, so we're not trying to hide that fact. But it's trying to protect all of us. So, yeah, so I'm gonna, and then I feel like. Obviously, any of you who feel comfortable speaking up. Presumably on any of these points, you know, as either a member or as a resident, I mean, I may speak. Separately as a resident about the marijuana thing. Cause I have my own personal opinion, but you know, I'm gonna clearly. Never express a personal opinion as a representing the planning. Board. So, but you're all free to, you're residents, right? So join the party.
Yeah, Mike, just as you know, like if someone. Such a good member of the board, you can't give her any advice if someone reaches out to you about planning board issues. And we can't deliberate it out of work, I can't call you to talk about it.
Yep.
They have to make an appointment and come before us to speak about it.
Yep.
So we can't give out unsolicited or advice to people or.
Right, you can say,
Not allowed.
go to the planning board.
Yeah, if they, hey, can I do this in this district? You need to come before us and ask us.
Yeah.
and we can't even chat together, three of us, I think two of us can. Otherwise, we're open meeting law.
Yeah, if we're at a picnic and we're all talking, we can't talk.
You have to have a forum and et cetera, yeah.
And advertise and all that.
And when there's emails, because Brian will send an email out to all of us, you can't hit reply all.
Yeah.
just singular.
You can reply to
Yeah.
Brad,
Yeah.
but you can't reply to all. because
You'll,
that's
you'll
violation.
get briefed in on like open meeting law. and
Yep.
Conflicts of interest and stuff like that.
Yeah, you're gonna have to take a conflict of interest. Yes.
I think I already did it for ag and measure.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
They have you checked out.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was about annual town meeting. I wanted to alert you that, there's been some additional activity, at the Bay State blasting site up off of Chestnut Plain Road. So the abutter, Mike Moore, you know, produced what he thought was, evidence of additional activity going on or movement of materials, and he ran his drone over the facility. Now, obviously, we're sensitive. I don't know anything about these people, and I don't necessarily think that they're. I think it's as possible that they're doing bad things, or that, if you're afraid, as a butter might be, and you can find evidence, any photograph can convince you that something bad is
Their
happening.
family built it. His wife's father built it.
So,
I
Right,
worked,
but
I worked
somebody
there
else
when
is
it was
now running.
Pioneer. You can't do anything bad. They
so,
are more regulated than you can possibly imagine.
and so I'm
Every
kind of
single
in the-
thing in and out is counted, it's counted out, it's counted in. Like, there is no, the days of funny business with explosives are long gone.
I'd like to believe that, and I really don't.
It's,
I don't honestly know what to believe, but you have an abutter who says, look at all this stuff going in and out, and I'm flying this drone, and look at this. So we ended up,
Well, they go to the building inspector.
obviously, we have no enforcement ability, we don't have no investigatory powers, we brought this again to the attention of the building inspector. And ultimately, he and JP Kennedy went to the site.
Do they need a warrant? to inspect?
There was discussion about but they didn't, I sort of said, look, let's not make this a federal thing, like, they don't need a warrant, just ask if you can go and do an inspection.
Yeah.
And, because also I wanna be careful that we're not harassing a business that's doing perfectly fine things,
Paying
but they
taxes.
sit over the act.
Paying taxes.
Yes, they do.
They pay taxes, but they sit over the act. And I think this keeps coming up, right? And so I don't know exactly what to believe, right? But anyway, the building inspector made a site visit along with JP Kennedy, and they concluded that nothing of any concern is going on there. So, we've just asked, our aquifer protection overlay district bylaw enumerates a whole slew of prohibitions on what uses in the aquifer protection district. And it occurred to me, maybe we should just send a letter, not an accusatory letter, merely an informational letter, reminder letter, just so you're aware, your land sits within the aquifer protection, and these things are prohibited. Please,
Would it be, maybe best practice to send that to everyone who's in the aquifer overlay protection district, so that way they can, and if we are listing activities that mostly apply to them, that's
Yeah.
fine.
yeah.
But if we send it to everyone, does it-
It's a great point. Right now, Pete has suggested that we did not send a letter to the property owner, but we
Okay.
send a letter to the building inspector. Pete has given me some guidance about what might be in that letter. And of course, I'm not gonna send any letter before it comes before this board in a public meeting. I just want you to be aware, stuff, a butter reported seemingly concerning things. There's been an investigation. The conclusion is nothing significant. And there's some next action that we could choose to take. So I'm gonna draft the letter, and at our next board meeting, whenever that is, we'll review it.
I have 2 points that are kind of different. I think when we do site plan approval for stuff, we should If something in our, we issue a site plan approval. Proving compliance with our conditions. Of the building inspectors walking you through, but they come back and show us that they did their plantings, they did their screenings, they did their stuff. So that we have compliance, that people are listening to us.
Yep.
And so that was one thing, but the other thing is. Now the ice cream is open back up on River Road, whatever happened with that. And the letter sent to them about that they have to sell their farm products, grow in the place, because they don't sell any produce there,
Yeah,
they sell ice cream. What happened with that?
the letter was sent and it was another one of those, just advisory letters. So there's been no follow-up and it will be.
If there was a letter written to the building inspector, it's an issue, otherwise don't ask, don't tell.
Yeah, I mean, I think we or somebody would have to raise a concern about Simmer's Creek.
I like the ice cream, it's good.
Yeah.
I go all the time.
Right, I don't want them to close either.
Yeah.
As long as Board of Health certified, but they are not,
Following the rules.
they're not compliant, it is not a farm stand. By any way, shape or form, it's a restaurant.
Okay, all right, let's tell
At
you
this
what,
point in the year though, are they gonna really have produce ready that they grew on the farm to sell anyways? Not necessarily. So maybe we wait and see if in July and August, are they selling produce at the farm stand?
There are certain percentages though that are billed.
Okay.
all right, because I don't want this to go on all night,
All right,
right?
we can talk about
So
it.
let's just note that for discussion, follow up at our next meeting, all right? So that was about Bay State blasting. Sarah did a nice, just so you're aware, I will circulate this to everyone on the board. She did a review of various application fees for different things in surrounding towns. So,
Nothing consistent.
yeah. no
But
surprise.
maybe we should have. And additionally, it got cohesive in my head with that conversation with Roger. Planning board site plans or planning board special permits versus ZBA special permits.
Right, yeah. Okay, so that's just some research has been done and, whenever we have some time, we'll look into that, but I will circulate that. Okay, regarding our next, you heard about the admin assistant that looks like we could really hire.
She's great.
Who's this?
When,
The chief nurse daughter.
Oh. Nice.
Yeah, she's great.
okay,
Very
hopefully,
right.
hopefully she won't quit before she starts.
She's got kids to support.
No, that's good,
She's
that's
great.
good, so maybe we've gotta keep her. Regarding our next meeting, I'm gonna be out of the country in Switzerland, yeah. At the time of our next meeting in June, so I'm going to. I think one thing that could be done is we could keep the date, because you were vice chair.
Yep.
And if there was, for example, an A&R or some piece of business
We could,
that had to
we
happen,
could pass meeting minutes, that's about it, kick it to the next meeting.
yeah. You could, or we could easily skip it.
Can we play it by ear?
Yes, I mean, you absolutely could.
If something comes in,
How long before does it need to be posted? 2 weeks?
Like,
1 week?
no, 48 hours.
Oh, good.
okay,
We're not advertising anything.
well, let's plan on that, we're gonna skip
Yeah,
the meeting.
but again, that has to you have to be really careful because it's gotta be 48 hours before the meeting, it has to be posted. But of course, the people in the town offices aren't able to post things after like 2 o'clock in the afternoon on a Thursday. So if you miss that deadline, you're like toast.
Okay.
So what I was also going to suggest, because this select board is continuing to have their meetings on like the last Wednesday of these months. And which is, we've been, like, tonight we moved it from a Wednesday to a Thursday. So what I was going to suggest, and now I'm thinking about July, if I check the calendar, July 30th would be the last Wednesday of July. But maybe we'll either move our meeting to Tuesday, the 29th, or Thursday, like, if people are okay with Thursday night, like tonight, then we could start.
Sometimes Thursdays are tough for me because I have Greenfield farmers.
Okay, what about
But typically-
Tuesdays?
Tuesday would be fine, yeah.
Tuesdays, how do people feel about?
Tuesdays are good, except finance committee season, I'm on the finance committee and our meetings are on Tuesdays.
On Tuesdays?
Yeah.
So we can.
What if we're getting off of that?
Actually, I like it. I do like it.
All right, well, so,
Typically, the Greenfield Farmers is the week before, but
okay,
yeah, so there's some wiggle room for me.
okay, all right. So for now, but finance committee season is only a couple of months.
Oh, yeah, it's just.
So like we could flip to Thursdays for a couple of months or
We have
something
to.
like that if we had to. So let's see if we can agree that our July meeting, which might be the first meeting I'm back at, would be on Tuesday, July 29th at 5:30.
Okay.
All right, so we'll agree to that. And we have to make a motion about that, and that maybe going forward, we will routinely meet on the last Tuesday of the month at 5:30, rather than the last Wednesday. So that definitely deconflicts us from the select board. If the select board stops nosing into our, third meeting time, we could potentially go back to it. But I'm good with either Tuesdays or Thursday nights. Let's do
Do
it
you
on
want a motion,
Tuesday.
motion
We
for?
don't need to do that by motion. Okay, that's just gonna be the schedule. And will be noted in the minutes. So the game plan is, I don't care about June. I think. Just look at the June calendar, because you still have the select board issue. That it seems like if you guys wanna meet in June. You would meet on, say, Tuesday, the 24th. Because the last Wednesday of June is the 25th, which is the select board meeting, right? And, Mike. So Mike could not be appointed. Till after the town election, when the town moderator is presumably reelected. Town moderator cannot do any appointments beyond the end of his current term.
But doesn't, you have to wait for Sarah's term to expire before?
Well, yes, that's right, but the appointment could be started to put into place to take effect on July 1. So I think the game plan is that for Tuesday, July 24th, the planning board would meet only if there is a need, like an AM.
Okay.
I'll put it in.
But hold that date.
Yeah, so I'll put it
Hold the
in. Just-
24th at 5:30 for a meeting, but then it's all on you,
Okay.
orchestrate this whole thing.
Okay.
All right. And then the next meeting in July would be on the
The 20th.
29th. Okay. The very last thing is, because I didn't really cover this with BESS, but because I remember, I think to make progress on this BESS bylaw is going to take. We can, no more than two of us can ever meet outside of a public meeting. And if you indicated, Laura, that you were interested in this subject, I think there is going to be a need to work on revisions to a best bylaw, outside of this meeting to make progress. We can use the meeting to have discussions and feedback about something like we did tonight. But I think if we try to craft revisions live during a meeting.
Mhm.
So my question to you is, can you sustain any amount of meeting time that we could do, you and I, over Zoom or whatever, to look at some things and really do some work?
That would be very difficult for me to commit to. I am slammed at work right now.
Okay,
So, at the moment, no, but if we get the moratorium on it for a little bit
Yeah.
and can buy ourselves some time.
right,
I'm hopeful that work will be slowing down,
all right,
maybe in August or September, which
okay,
is
all right.
not soon enough.
all right.
Yes, so tentatively, yes, but not in the immediate future.
All right, well then, here's the thing, in the interim, because I have probably more time than most of you. What I've been doing on my own is I've been really looking at the Medway bylaw and doing the like mapping, like what did Judy take over? What did she leave out? Why? And like really digging into that and looking at some of these other towns like Sunderland
It'd be great to get Sunderland.
and blanking on it, but
Did Wendell put one in?
not, no, Wendell was
Wendell's
just
completely
fighting this
different.
thing tooth and nail.
Yeah.
But anyway, I've got some other models where I thought there are some things that I didn't see in Medway that I thought, so I'm gonna start to try to come up with a redraft a best bylaw that is closer to Medway than the one that Judy produced. Because, like I said, there are certain things about Medway's structure that I really liked, and the way it was organized, that there was material there that really seemed to speak to ZBA, and other material that really spoke to the planning board. Then I saw, like in Shelburne, that was the one they just,
Okay.
they seem to actually have a section that looked even better, like even just the titles, like design and performance standards, which is like so planning board.
Yeah. Conway, I didn't realize Jeff Lacy had moved to Conway from
Yes.
Shrewsbury. He's a professional planner.
Yes, I
So
know.
he's on Conway, so Conway is working on theirs in terms of similar town. I mean, we are much more river bottom and aquifer issues,
Right.
but size-wise, some forest
Septic
issues.
wells, things like
Yeah,
that are gonna be
they're-
similar.
And I mean, I'm sure Shelburne has those more similar issues too.
I think so too. And I've been reaching out to Medway's planning board. So I haven't gotten a response, but basically I've been like, could we like set up a call? Like, I'd like to ask you a bunch of questions because, you know, like understand that we're putting a certain amount of trust and faith in that what Medway produced, like there was they used a consultant, they
Right.
thought it all through. But there's certain things when I look at these things they put in their bylaw, I'm like, why exactly did you do that? And like, and right now I'm just, like, I have to just believe that they had a good reason, and if it was good for them, it's good for us. So I'm not super comfortable going forward with that on a matter of this complicated.
If you are able to set up a meeting with the town of Medway, I will make time to attend something like that for sure. I just don't think I can commit to like a longer term
I understand.
thing right now, but I am very interested in this. I'm very like motivated to have something that works for a large number of people.
So then maybe just my specific or general ask is I'm gonna circulate. I mean, I think I've already circulated Medway's, but I'll circulate Sunderland's as well as Shelburne's. And if I find one for Conway or another,
They're
good-
working on it.
but I think we all will need to, well, less you, maybe more you. I'll start to include you in these emails, because you heard, like, if we're gonna do this, other towns have the benefit of like paid staff. I don't know that we in Whately are gonna be able to hire a consultant to advise us on one of these. I think now there's enough good models out there that if we at least understand them well enough, we can pull together something that's gonna work for us.
See if Pete or the FERCog, I know grants are totally, and just the whole environment around that is different, but there may be some planning grants.
Yes, and I know there's somebody at FERCog who supposedly devoted to this topic among other things. I will say that that person looked at a draft of the Whately bylaw and I think the world of FERCog. I don't want to like speak ill of FERCog, but my personal impression was that that person's reaction was like, oh, that's great, like, and I just didn't feel like
It was maybe too surface
it
level.
was a little too. I just didn't feel a real level of critical analysis. And maybe it's just because so few towns have these and it's so complicated, but I had questions about this bylaw draft, and just for somebody from FERCog to say, looks good to me. just didn't leave me with a feeling of comfort.
Are there potentially any resources available from like UMass or any of the other 5 colleges that could help us understand what the battery energy storage systems look like and what some of the concerns need to be, or I don't know if that's
Certainly,
possible,
they
but-
do have UMass has it's the CEC.
Yep, I'm also thinking of the whole department, yeah, with the very, sorry,
I know this guy River,
the environmental conservation,
yeah,
the ECE, no, that's environment, that's engineering, sorry. There is an
River Strong.
environmental.
yeah.
I just delivered from Commonwealth.
Oh, okay.
Hey,
You got
good,
that?
perfect, hook us up.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I worked with him in a different, when I was at UMass.
Yeah.
But yes, so these are the things, like I can't,
The guys from South Deerfield told me there's shipping containers.
yeah. See if you can find it.
Why
out.
is she
Where,
More about
here?
that. Well, you
I'll reach
can
back out. I was-
certainly some,
Well, it sounds like champions.
I don't know what the capacity is, like if you could learn anything more about that or get a contact.
So now they
But
put shipping containers.
This is one of the things, there's all of this, reading and research and follow-up that needs
Right.
to be done, and it takes time. And when I did not expect the study group to turn into a bylaw drafting group. And I didn't, when I signed up for the study group, I didn't really sign up to be drafting a bylaw.
Right.
And in retrospect, I mean, I understand, I have great respect for Judy and her judgment and her experience. But I think in retrospect, having somebody like basically single-handedly draft this bylaw, because no one really on the study committee could provide a commensurate level of input or expertise. And a lot of it was like, looks good to me.
Right.
And I was there, but I just couldn't engage at that time, just like,
Yeah.
we get it, right?
Brad,
So now I'm trying to,
yeah, you sent an email out today about agriculture conservation restriction policy at Whately.
yes.
Can you just expound on that a little bit?
I don't know what motivated it.
We got something from the Ag Commission that you're on.
Yes,
Wait a minute, wasn't it the Malinowski property?
Olszewski. On River Road.
Olszewski.
Olszewski.
Yes.
Yes.
So I don't know,
The grandson is.
I don't know
Malinowski.
what motivated Doug. Judy suggested that Doug remind the planning board of the APR policy.
But they're looking to put that property on River Road into APR,
Yes.
right?
But they
Yeah.
broke a piece off, they broke the house off.
Right, and then they broke off, I
Yeah.
think, a second building lot too, potentially,
Okay,
but.
maybe that was.
But if they're excluding,
If
if
they
they're
haven't
putting
put
it
an
into,
APR yet, it doesn't matter.
well, that and also APR is gonna have its own rules and regulations
Oh,
that are gonna be complicated. Yeah, I deal with APR frequently at work and it's a pain in the ass.
Yes.
So I think that whatever APR regulations they're gonna put is gonna be way more strict in terms of development. They have verbiage in their APR agreements about the square footage that can be an impervious surface on the property, which is rooftops, driveways that are paved, so on and so forth. So I don't know why we
So,
even.
so I understand what
The
Alex,
only thing that it seemed to me that was relevant was that there is, when we do A&Rs, that we have this. We have an assertion from the person doing the A&R that the
Right.
parcel is not under an
the
agricultural
use doesn't matter to us.
But we cannot, by this policy, we cannot approve an A&R of a parcel
That's in.
that is already under an APR.
Right, but it's
So they
just,
have to move that
So
out and.
if Alan Sanderson brought us, what he brought us today, if that piece that he's selling to his neighbor was a.
If it were,
We could not have done.
he could not have done that.
You have to go, you have to go through APR.
through the state, right?
Yeah.
APR wouldn't even probably allow the sale of that anyways.
Right.
They would allow it to another farm.
Right, but they're not gonna allow it to expand somebody's backyard. Cause they have to
Go as
approve
far
the
as to
person
control the
purchasing
price
it.
of it.
Yes,
But
it's like
because we didn't
15
ask
grand
him,
an
was
acre.
this-
No, but
Yeah.
I
Oh, he
was gonna speak
He
to
did.
that point. Well, first of all, the A&R application form, this form, if you look at it,
So maybe we should.
Says right on there.
it says, read the language up at the top.
Right, because that
It's
APR,
not under an agricultural
Right.
APR.
However, just because there's text on the application.
right,
I did want to verbally
Yes.
confirm it.
I think honestly, APR, the state is gonna come down on you if you violate your APR agreement. And whatever the state is gonna do is gonna be worse than our, whatever we're gonna
Wow.
do, so.
I financially.
Yeah.
Is there a setback to it here?
What do you mean is that?
It's more about usage, I believe. She would know better, and Mike would know better.
Yeah, what do you mean by setback, the setback from where?
Also, like, Billy Smith wants me to add a little into this building, but right behind this little building is a power lines.
Oh,
It's
no,
all
I
one
don't think,
property.
if it's a separate property, then no, I think you would just have to conform to the town's setbacks.
But he's gonna have to be setbacks from town because it's,
He meets the setbacks pretty well.
right, because if you're farming, but like, and you, again, you can both correct me, I know my brother-in-law David, who farms organic, he's the one who needs to do his buffer.
Yes. It is,
Your
it's,
neighbors don't have to do the buffer.
Yeah.
Right, it's your responsibility.
Right.
Yeah.
So if that property was APR and too close to a shed for whatever reasons, or not APR, but organic, they would need to do the
Buffer
buffer.
has to make buffer.
Yeah.
yes,
Okay,
from his boundary in.
Yeah,
okay,
yeah, you can't make somebody else,
okay.
Yeah.
right, else property.
Well, it's
for
so,
your reasons.
Are there any other items not anticipated?
A motion to adjourn.
I just want to, yeah, because I'm impressed with your, your staying power, you guys. So I have no further items for you.
Well, can I just say something? Pending us having a meeting in June,
Yes.
can we formally thank her for.
Okay,
her
and that's-
support?
And that's all.
Nothing else. This has been lovely. I am not
Oh.
somebody with big
Oh, that's right. So,
to-dos in anything, and no pizza party would
Just
ever
saying-
had. It was
Just
just,
wanted to say thank you.
I have really enjoyed my short time with you,
okay.
leaving it in really good hands, and this has been fascinating.
Yeah, that I had, by missing the June meeting. I mean, but
I'm
yes,
not doing anything now.
yeah, no, we're not doing
We're not
it.
doing that.
No, we're just doing it right here and now, kind of
Yes.
seat of the pants. Thank you for your service. to
Yeah,
the town.
thank you.
All right.
Ooh, new chapter,
Your point of view. It's good.
but it's been really great. I've done like. Since he was.
Says diapers.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, very good. Then I could entertain a motion to adjourn.
A
Your
second.
last chance.
Your last.
No, you
your last
should make
motion.
Oh, I will make a motion to adjourn the May 20.
Yeah, so the motion has been made. Do I have a
I'll
second?
second it.
All right, we are officially adjourned.